Okay, so first off, do you mind me recording?
No, not at all.
Okay, so thanks for allowing me to interview you. The only people that will see this transcript will be my tutor and me. Everything will be kept anonymous and completely confidential. So can you tell me a little bit about your family structure growing up?
So it was pretty usual, really. I had my father, my mother, two younger sisters. Lived in a suburban part of London. Grew up in the same area. Sort of been living in and around the same area of London for most of my life. It's all pretty usual.
Okay, so what do or did your parents do?
So my dad ran a fostering company and then left to become a consultant in and around fostering private sort of threshold sector. And my mum was a sociology tutor, and then she left that to raise me. Then she became a part-time English tutor later on in life.
Okay, so did either of your parents at any point work part-time?
Yeah, so my mum's a teaches English part-time.
Okay, so how long has she been working part-time for?
Wow. Probably about 10 years now.
Okay, so did she pick you up from school? Did she go part-time for you?
Yeah, but she was mainly part-time when I was able to sort myself out. So it was mainly when it was probably in later stages of high school when she started part-time tutoring. And back then it was probably about maybe 2 hours in a week, and now it's a lot more frequent. Obviously because she's got a bit less responsibilities in terms of raising kids.
Okay, so did she go part-time to look after you and your siblings?
Yeah, well, if she went full-time, there would be no one to pick us up from school, etc. So, it was just something she had to do.
Okay, so why didn't your father work part-time?
Well, I guess because, well, no, he had the better job, and he was earning more money. I think it's just, yeah, that was the main reason, really, I think.
So you don't think it was anything to do with their gender roles?
I think it could have a bit to do with the whole maternal side of things, with mother caring or wanting to be around their kids a lot more and raise them, I think, and look after them and such. Whereas, well, I'm not saying like my father didn't want to look after me, but he was at work most of the time, and then yeah.
Okay, so you've got siblings, and can you tell me a little bit about them, their age, their gender?
Yep, so my younger sister is about 3 years younger than me, and the youngest is there's an 8-year age gap between us.
Okay, so and they're both girls?
They're both girls.
So do you think your parents offered you and your sisters the same opportunities as you when you were a kid?
Yeah, I think they did, definitely. I had the chance to go to university. They had the chance to go to university as well. So in that sense, I think everything was equal on that threshold.
Okay. So I'm just going to make you watch a video quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you think of the video?
Well, obviously, as a kid, I think in the light of this interview, I kind of look at it maybe in a different way, because I do remember the video. Do you remember seeing it when it was on television and not thinking anything of it?
Okay.
Another advert. But now when you look at it in terms of the aspect of gender, which is probably what this interview's about, I guess, then you have a whole different sort of retrospective on it. Just because the boy is sort of singled out his career path as becoming a scientist, and then the female's kind of growing up as a ballerina. It's quite different sort of roles there.
Right, and do you see an issue with this?
No, I don't see an issue with this really at all. I think it could be in different ways. It could be it's quite hard to put into perspective, because I understand where you're coming from, but I don't see anything wrong about it. I mean, kids can grow up to be anything they want to be. I think it's probably just an ideal perspective from a mother's eyes. Maybe they see their daughters as more, they want them to be more creative, more pretty and such, whereas their sons, they want them to grow up to be powers of industry and all of that.
Okay.
Scientists and whatnot.
So do you think it does enforce kind of gender stereotypes in any way, or not really?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess it does enforce these stereotypes. But do I think that's necessarily a bad thing? It's not going to mislead anyone into choosing what career path they want. It's just sort of putting into a pretty ideal perspective for potentially a mother who's like, I mean, they're advertising for mothers, right? In this advert, so why wouldn't they sort of kind of create an idyllic perspective with this? What is it, baby powder? Yeah.
Okay, so how do you think adverts like this can affect how children view gender?
Well, honestly, I don't know how much one advert is going to affect a child's perspective, especially if it's advertising powdered milk. I don't know if it's really going to grab a kid's attention. I mean, I remember watching it when I was a lot younger than I was now, and I mean, it didn't really have any impact on me whatsoever, and I'd like to think I'm more intelligent than a child who would probably take this more in than anyone else, but yeah, I don't know how much it would affect it, but in that sense, I don't think it would influence anything in terms of gender. I don't really think kids see gender as a thing anyways. So seeing a boy grow up to be a scientist, seeing a girl to grow up to be a ballerina, I don't think they'd sort of limit that to them being of a female or male gender. I think they'll be able to think that, oh, I can grow up to be this, I can grow up to be that. I don't think it's gender specific.
Okay, great. So now we're kind of on the topic of gender. How would you define gender?
Well, I guess one species and another. How would you define male and female? I don't really know how to put that into words exactly. Well, one has different private parts.
Okay.
But I guess it's a different maybe cultures with it. I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. So how would you define sex in terms of gender?
I don't really know. How would I define it? I can't really define gender and then define... Isn't it the same thing?
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So we'll move on. So how was your school experience? Did you enjoy it?
Not particularly. I mean, I was good at learning, and I think I got the grades I wanted to and all of that. I worked fairly hard, but I wouldn't say I enjoyed it particularly. It was more a chore than anything else. If I had the choice not to go to school back then, I would definitely have chosen not to go. So,
okay. Yeah. So do you ever remember a time in which you felt that you were discriminated against at school for any reason at all?
No, never at all. I don't think so. I mean, obviously certain teachers had it in for certain pupils, and a few of those teachers might have singled me out. But I mean, that's part of life, really. I think, and nothing different.
Okay, so did you ever witness any discrimination at school? Any bullying for any particular reasons?
Well, there's always going to be bullying in schools. I don't think that's particularly discriminatory.
Okay.
But it's definitely a factor. And I mean, it was definitely present in my school in a sense where some kids would be picked on, and I mean it was just the way it was.
Not for any particular reason, just because
I don't
it
think so.
happened.
I mean,
Okay.
obviously some kids that sort of stood out in terms of being more quiet than others, or I don't know, or even the kids who were more loud than others, they would get picked on. But yeah, I think it's quite obvious sometimes in a classroom. You can kind of work out what's going to happen.
Okay.
If you know what I mean.
That's fine. So, do you remember any point in your childhood, kind of from nursery school to secondary school, sixth form, where you had a different experience to the girls? Was there any situation where you weren't allowed to do things that the girls were allowed to do, or girls weren't allowed to do things that you were allowed to do?
Yeah, so our whole games curriculum was completely different. So physical education in school, that was completely different.
Yeah, so do you ever remember boys and girls being treated differently in school?
Yeah, definitely. In physical education, I think that was always a factor.
Mm-hmm.
We had completely different curriculums. The boys would do rugby in the winter, football in the winter, and then have cricket in the summer, and the girls would have pretty much hockey rounders in the summer. That would be it, essentially. I remember when they went and made the girls do orienteering, and I don't think any of us particularly took that seriously as a sport, but they were made to do it. They weren't particularly happy about it, but
So
yes, it was just part of the curriculum.
why do you think the boys were allowed to do rugby and the girls were not?
I guess it was just more of a male-dominated sport, to be honest. And I mean, I know my school was very competitive, so I know that most of what the curriculum was aimed around was making the boys all good at the sports that they competed in, which was rugby, cricket, football, and I don't know if there was really a rugby side of things for girls in the area. I don't even think it was very considered. Is women's rugby, is that a thing?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't aware of it, you see, so I mean, how would they really be pushing them to do it when there's more prominent women sports out there, like netball and such, of course, which is what they did most of the time. I think they focused more on those sports for the girls. I know towards the end of my schooling life it did start to change, and noticed women's football was more of a thing, and it's definitely more of a thing now. But yeah, essentially it was quite different in that respect. But I think it was only physical education really where that had a play, to be honest.
Okay. So, what do you remember as being your favourite toy as a child?
Well, I had a teddy bear which was around before I was born, a little Winnie the Pooh.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm pretty sure that was what was in my bed every night as a child.
Okay.
But I mean, I always had cars and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you had cars. Would you say that most of the toys that you remember the best were kind of oriented towards boys? So kind of like, footballs and cars and trucks and...
Well, when I do look back on it, all my favourite toys were those sorts of things. I had toy cars. They were my favourites. I remember footballs that my closest mates had signed for me. I used to keep that by my bed. That was one of my treasured items. So it is those things that mean the most to me, I think. But obviously, I had a teddy bear as well that meant a lot to me. And is that really something that's assigned a gender role? I think it's a unisex thing, if anything. but obviously the toys I do remember best and the ones I grew up playing with the most do tend to be, I guess, boy orientated.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all sort of, well, then again, would you say boy orientated when it's all sports? I mean, footballs, tennis balls, cricket bats, you know, it's more sports specific, I would
But they
say.
are sports traditionally played by men.
Yeah, they are, 100%.
Okay. So your sisters, do you remember what their favourite toys were, or toys you remember seeing them playing with a lot?
Yeah, Barbies I think was the main one. Had a box full of Barbies. Any sort of toys they could play with. If you remember Bratz, that was a thing of just Barbies but with bigger heads.
Yeah.
Anything like that. I think babies as well. You know, like baby dolls they can look after, maybe go to the loo and whatnot.
Yeah.
Those ones.
Did they ever have toy cars or footballs or?
Not really. No, I don't think it was something they were particularly interested in, to be honest.
Why do you think they weren't interested in that?
Well, I know that my sister was definitely not interested in football. So that would probably be a factor as to why she wasn't exactly the sportiest.
Do you think she wasn't interested in football because she was a girl, so she wasn't expected to be interested in football, or do you think it was just?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think if maybe it was because, I mean, there's a massive hype. I know as a kid, there's always a massive hype in your classes talking about football. There's a football match on. If she wanted to get involved in it, I'm sure she could have. But I guess she was maybe not pushed down a certain route. But if all your friends are doing something, then you'd probably do the same, right?
Okay.
So I do think it is that, to be honest, and television as well. What you're watching, I think a lot of cartoons and stuff like that is the ones that are geared towards little girls are the ones that do involve like Barbie is a television show, isn't it? Bratz, that was based off of a television show. I think it's all comes from that a lot of the time, and that sort of chooses their toys for them.
Okay. So if you say wanted to play with Barbie dolls, would that have been an issue for your parents?
I don't think so. I know that I did have. Well, I did want my hair tied up in bunches as a kid, stuff like that. So I think I was sort of. It came from quite a family that wouldn't sort of push anything.
Okay. What about your friends at school? Do you think they would see that as an issue?
Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm. And why is that?
Well, I mean, it's not every day you see a boy playing with a Barbie doll, you know? I think it's something that would definitely have been mocked in my primary school. I think it was just commonplace. The boys played football, the girls did what they wanted. And that was that. I mean, I remember one lunchtime actually I was going to go hang out with this girl because it was a girl I fancied at the time. I just wanted to hang out with her. So I went to do that one lunchtime and all the rest of the boys came up to me. They're like, "Oh, what are you doing? We need you for football." And I was like, yeah, I've got to go play football. Screw this. And when I went back to play football. So I think it is very much that culture of the boys are all friends, we're all playing football, and that's what it is. Whereas I think the girls had more varied lunchtimes.
Yeah. So, your qualifications, do you think that they would be any different if you're a girl?
My qualifications.
The qualification that you're getting from school?
Yeah, I do think so. Well, I went on to do a geography degree at university, and I think geography is quite seen as a boyish subject, quite an old man sort of boyish subject, and it's quite traditionally male dominated as one of those landscape study analysis sort of heavy statistic subjects. So maybe that's sort of influenced my route of going down there. I mean, I could have chosen like an art degree or something like that if I was swayed in any other way. Was always one thing, I was always very interested in English, and that's got no clear sort of route. I think it's quite equally male and female oriented, so I could have easily gone down that route. Maybe something swayed me to choose the geography route. I'm not sure what that is, but it could have been something along those lines.
Okay. So you have no children.
Yeah.
Do you feel any pressure to have any children?
No. I mean, it might be a factor in my future. I know my mum definitely wants me to have kids, like grandkids or whatever, but as far as I'm concerned, it's not going to happen.
Okay. So do you think that there would be more pressure on you to have children if you were a woman?
I think so. It's got to be a factor, really, because I think it's just that sort of maternal instinct, right? So people just expect it more, expect you to want kids more. I mean, if with me it's the fact that I just don't want them, whereas I think that's probably more quite a usual thing for a bloke rather than a female.
Okay. Right, so I'm just going to give you a statistic. So 4% of fathers work part-time compared to 40% of mothers. So would you expect this statistic?
So 4% of fathers work part-time.
And 40% of mothers.
I don't see why that would be a particularly outstanding statistic. It's kind of what I would expect. I think most fathers probably need to work full time to support their family, and 40% of women. Is it 40% of women working part time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's more usual, I guess. Because obviously, if you factor in housewives into that equation, so they wouldn't have a job, and then percentage of women working part time. It's quite a large percent, so the majority are probably doing that around looking after kids and stuff like that. So part time is more of a necessity.
Okay, so do you think that mothers should stay at home instead of fathers?
Well, I think they're more suited to looking after children. I think it just comes from that maternal aspect. I mean, they're the ones who carried the child. They have more that, I think that maternal instinct that maybe a father doesn't have. So I think it's just something that's kind of necessary in that sense. I think it's more something it's definitely more usual just because of that fact, I think.
So do you think a mother is a better mother if they stay at home with the kids instead of go to work?
I don't see why they wouldn't be. I think having a mother around is kind of like a responsibility to having kids, and then I just think it's probably something that a child would probably go without if they didn't have that, you know.
So it's probably more the mother's responsibility than the father's responsibility to stay at home with the kids.
I do think so, because of the factor of care for a child. I think if you wanted to give your child the best care possible, which I'm sure most parents do, then I do think it would probably be the mother that would be best served being more, not necessarily being at home, but being there for the kid much more.
Okay.
More than the father is what I would say, because I mean, money is a necessity in this day and age, and somebody's got to earn it.
Okay, so if you were to have a child, say, and they had a problem at school, they needed to be picked up, or they were ill, would you expect them to call yourself or the mother?
I'd probably call the mother, because I mean, mother would probably be at home, so she'd be able to pick them up.
So you would prefer your partner to stay at home to look after your children if you were to have any?
Yeah, I think I would prefer it, because I mean, with my job as well, I've got to be in the office constantly. I can't work from home. yeah, it's just sort of necessary. And I mean, I don't know how much nannies cost these days, but I don't want to be forking that out. And I think the best care for my kids would, if I wanted to go down that certain route, it should be person who carried them for 8 months to be at home, to be honest.
Okay, great. So, say there is a mother and a father in your workplace.
Yeah.
Would you expect the father to be promoted above the mother if there was an option for promotion but only one could have it?
Well, I guess it all comes down to how many hours someone's going to work. And I do think if the mother is going to be having to look after her kids, that's an extra responsibility a company has to factor in as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, when you're interviewing an employee for a job, you have to take into account all their factors that are outside of the workplace as well, because that's going to impact on the workplace, on their attitude, on how well they're able to commit to a job, work a job, act dedicated to a job. So I think that is a factor, yeah. So I do think the father, well, depending on their situation, they'd have more time in the office available to them, whereas the mother might not have.
Okay, so how many hours a week would you say you currently spend on housework, living on your own?
God, not as much as I should have. Probably about an hour a day.
Okay. If you were to have a partner that lives with you, how many hours a day would you expect them to spend on housework?
Probably an hour a day, and that would be my work off my plate.
Okay. Okay. So that would be the same, I'm assuming, if it was a stay-at-home mother, you would expect them to do the majority of the housework.
I don't see why not. They'll be in the house, so I mean, the only time I get to do housework is when I'm in my house, so, and that is probably for the few hours I have in that day. If they're going to be at home full time, then I guess they could definitely probably fit in an hour of housework.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what age were you when you started working?
I was 21, straight out of university.
Okay. And what sector do you work in?
Sales, primarily.
Okay. So, do you feel fairly paid?
I do. I think everything is reflected by the hours I put in, how hard I work, my efficiency, how good I am at a job, conversion, everything to do with that. So I feel you get what you put in, but at the same time, I think I do think there's levels of responsibility that should be given to more committed employees, and the better employees should be singled out first, and there should be different ways of basically getting paid, I think, because there's a lot of loopholes in the system, I think, and there's just better ways of going about pay.
So, are you aware of any pay gap at the moment?
No.
Okay, so you think women and men are paid the same?
Yeah, it's the 21st century, right?
Okay, so there is actually still a pretty significant pay gap. Do you think this is fair?
Is that males and females who are doing the same job? There's a pay gap.
There is, but there is also a pay gap when looking overall, because obviously more women do part-time work.
Oh, so then surely a pay gap should be expected.
Okay. So if a man and a woman were to be in the same position,
Yeah.
do you think they should be paid the same?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. So in the future, would you like to see yourself as a breadwinner? Is that kind of what you would want for your family? Be able to have a...
Well, if I was to have family and kids, then yeah, definitely. I did see why not.
And you'd want your partner to be a housewife?
Well, yeah, I do think someone has to be at home to look after the kids, right?
Okay. So, have you ever worked part-time?
Nope.
Would you ever work part-time?
what would I do with all the rest of my time?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I need to make a living.
Okay. So, what jobs would you typically class as men and women's jobs? Is there anything that comes to mind when you think of a man's job and a women's job?
Well, I guess building, being builder, engineer, architect, everything that comes with that side of things, manual labour, I think that's very clearly male orientated. I think sales as well is quite male orientated.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd pin those industries down, those sectors.
For men's jobs, and what about for women's jobs?
Maybe more art side of things, marketing, like fashion, everything to do with that, I think.
Okay, great. So, do you think these stereotypes matter?
Why would they matter? I think it's the best person for the job, right? And it doesn't really matter who on gender. I think it just depends who's best for the job, and it just happens that this is things that people are interested in, different industries they get more geared towards.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's completely fine as long as it works.
Okay, great. So, I just want you to look at these pictures of these people here, and can you name them for me quickly?
Oh, lovely. Angela Merkel, Theresa May. I don't remember the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump, Putin, and I can't place the last one.
Okay, that's fine. So these are the the three most powerful women and three most powerful men in the world, according to Forbes.
Right.
The list is pretty male dominated. Do you think that's fair?
Well, I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Okay. So do you think that the men are dominating the top purely because they are better at their jobs?
Yeah, I think it also depends on their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, the only way these people can be ranked as powerful is if their jobs are of that particular role, and they must have done something to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's perfectly fair.
Okay, so what percentage would you say of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are women? So these are the top 500 companies in the world.
So maybe about, I don't know, 10% or something like that.
Yeah, so it's actually 5%.
Oh, right, okay.
Do you think this is... What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I guess more companies are run by men. With Fortune 500 companies, it might be like we just discussed. Business, the business sector is a very male-dominated industry, I do believe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know my company is for starters being in sales. So I think it's just one of those things, really. You just get a lot more male CEOs compared to women. I think usually maybe the case with women CEOs, they probably started the company themselves or something like that. And but yeah.
Okay, so just going quickly back to you working on a sales floor.
Yeah.
Have you ever witnessed any discrimination?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and what kind of discrimination have you witnessed? Is it against women or men?
I think it's against women. I mean, it is a sales floor at the end of the day. It's quite a laddish atmosphere.
Okay.
I mean, it's the best productive atmosphere to get figures and generate profit. I think it's very high intensity, and it is surrounded by that sort of that laddish Wolf of Wall Street atmosphere where there's a lot of banter.
Okay, is that banter mostly centred around women?
No, I wouldn't say. I think it's just general banter, but that just have. When you asked me that question before, I think it's just a few situations that sort of cropped up in my mind where I do think there's been some sort of slight discriminatory things.
Can you describe any of these situations? Have there been any kind of name calling or?
Yeah, there is a bit of name calling, like
Objectifying.
nicknames and stuff like that. I think that's something that comes up a bit.
Mm-hmm. And is that just for the women, or is it for the women and the men?
I think it's probably get around mostly the women.
Okay. Any examples?
I can't think of them off the top of my head. I think a few that I can think of are like people, well, a few of the lads, I guess, calling the women they see of darling, sweetheart, love. I think it's a common one.
Okay.
And then you get fairly ruder from that point onwards. But yeah.
Okay. So, is it mostly men on your sales floor?
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
It's a sales job. Sales sector is very male dominated. I do think a certain atmosphere is needed to push figures to get the best sales, and I think that's where very high intensity performers come into play. And I think that's what's needed: a very high intensity, high work drive, no distractions. Literally, sales is their life, and I think that's something that appeals more to males than women.
Okay. So I'm going to go through some phrases, and I just want to see if you recognise any of them. So do you know what the glass ceiling is?
No.
What about the sticky floor?
Nope.
And the glass cliff?
Not clear.
Okay. So these are all kind of terms in which people are disadvantaged due to their gender or their race or just being a member of any kind of minority.
Okay.
Do you think you've witnessed that in the workplace?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's fine. So, could you just describe in 3 words, so do you have both male and female managers at work?
Yeah.
Okay, so in 3 words, could you describe your male manager?
Pain in the arse, to be honest.
Okay.
No. He's very manic. I think manic would probably be the first word.
Mm-hmm.
Stressed. He's always stressed. And I feel like probably hard working. I'll give him that one.
Okay. So, now think about a female manager.
Intense. She's very on it, like a bit of a psychopath about the workload. I remember I saw her once screaming at some boy for being 2 minutes late to a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Poor kid. He just started as well, so
Okay.
completely blew up in his face. And another thing is I think her intensity. She's very like she cares a lot about the job. It's quite clear to see she's very hard working, and maybe attractive. She is like noticeably attractive.
Okay. So, just sticking with that word attractive, would you ever describe your any male in the office with that word?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, there's a few boys who are a bit of heartbreakers on the floor, I guess, but I wouldn't say that. No, not at all. I don't swing that way.
Okay, great. So we're just going to go on to LGBT issues. So, the legalisation of same-sex relationships at the same age as heterosexual relationships only occurred in 2000. Do you remember this happening? No?
No.
Is it anything that really bothers you? Is it relevant in your life at all?
Not really.
Okay. Does it concern you that it was only recently that this happened?
Yeah, it does actually.
Okay. That's fine. So, have you noticed anyone in the workplace at all being discriminated against because they are homosexual?
Yeah, I have there has been one incident in our workplace. I remember. So basically, there was an email sent out. It was a whole LG. Was it LBGT?
LGBT.
LGBT. On for the company.
Mm-hmm.
They added a Q to it. What's the Q about?
It's queer.
Oh, okay. Well, it was LGBTQ, whatever, and they were doing that for the company, and it was sent out in an email to the whole company, and one of our sales managers on the floor, he clicked reply, but he clicked reply all, and he was clearly not aware that he was replying to the whole company with this message, but he said, I think it was something along the lines of, "What's this, mate, with all this Batty Boy events?" And well, clearly this email was taken down in 5 minutes. Everyone was so panicked about it. I think he was sacked on the spot after a meeting literally 5 minutes later. So the company literally washed their hands of that incident very quickly.
Okay. Okay. Do you think they washed their hands of it because they disagreed or because they were worried about regulation?
I guess they were definitely worried about regulation. I think that would be their first point of panic, and then they'd worry about the moral issues later. So I do think a lot of things go on the sales floor, but I think they draw a line at certain stages, and definitely that